Welcome back, Ruma.
I thank you, Shah Rukh. Good. Today's Saturday. Good Saturday morning to you.
Likewise. Ruma, I'm going to dive straight into our discussion, all right? Um, the last time we were talking about control, and there's something that I've been thinking about ever since you brought in the entire topic of control. You mentioned that control is linked to glory in some shape, or we wouldn't run after control.
Mhm.
I'd love for you to tell me a little bit more about
Mm. So, why is control glorified?
it. Mhm.
Yeah. So, you see, when we think of control, it's between a child and an adult. Who do we think has more control?
An adult, I would guess.
Obviously, an adult, right? So, an adult is able to control body functions, not all body functions, but the body functions that you're supposed to control. A child is not able to. So, the very symbolic meaning of control is actually, linked with growing up, linked with being an adult. An adult can, we use the word control emotions. A child cannot. An adult can control thoughts, and these are various progressions of control other than just controlling some bodily functions. So it's linked, it's a symbolic link with being an adult. And when you are with a person who seems to be in control, when you are with an adult, there is a sense of safety, there's a sense of security with it, right? So control and safety and security actually are kind of linked. So when you are in the company of a person who seem to be in control of the environment or seems to be in control, and there is power which also comes in, which I'll talk in a later segment. But there is a link between safety, security, and control, which is why in a way it starts becoming, oh, it's good to have control. And that means it's starting to, this is the starting point of glorification, if I may say that. Okay.
Mhm.
Let's say I am, in a jungle and I have a small hut in a jungle. It gives me some sense of safety, some sense of control. I'm a little bit more in control. If I have a weapon with me, I am a little bit more in control. And so you see, I'm safer. So safety and control, there is a direct link. Now, which is why there is a reason why control is glorified. There is a reason why control is needed. It makes us feel safe. And what I want to call that actually is as healthy control.
Mhm.
The laws of a land, the rules, regulations, they make us feel safe. And that's healthy control. Yes. So the other side of the spectrum of healthy control is toxic control. And that's the piece which I feel is more unseen, is more invisible. And when we are talking about freedom, we are actually talking about not being under the influence of toxic control. So healthy control and freedom, they are two sides of the same coin for me, actually. It is the toxic control, which is the invisible control, which I feel we are all wanting to break free of.
Right. Roma, give me an example of toxic control in a work environment.
So when we talk about toxic control, toxicity is anything that disturbs the balance of an environment, or it induces some sort of not just imbalance, but totally disrupts a system or the balance. And an example of toxic control, usually when we talk about in the workplace, is relationships, right? I'm relating with you and to you, and one weapon of toxic control is shaming. And
Mhm.
we use that everywhere very unconsciously. It's being used on us, and we are not even aware of that most of the time. So anything that makes you feel small, anything that makes you want to hide, anything, that is shaming. Anything that you're ashamed of, and we want to hide from others, that is shame. And that is a very, I feel, potent toxic control weapon that we use. So the examples, if we look at in the workplace, bullying at the workplace, anybody wanting, consciously, unconsciously making the other person feel small. We use terms like you should be ashamed of doing this, or you should not be saying this. I had this in leadership workshops. I had this person saying this to his CEO, that any good leader would know that this is not how we should do things. You see how inadvertently our language is tuned towards shaming. Inadvertently, we are making the other person feel small. We're trying to be bigger. We're trying to control the situation, the outcome, the behavior of the other person by making the other person feel small.
And Ruma, if I were to take that same situation and flip the coin over and look at the healthy and freedom aspect of it, what would be our language uh, to come across and make our point?
Yeah, so which is why the laws, the rules, regulations, this is how we should or should not do things. That the known written laws are something which helps us build healthy control, or helps us with healthy. We know what the border controls are, for example, right? Similarly, what are the border controls in a relationship? Like, you will not abuse me is a border control of the relationship. That's a healthy control. What does abuse mean to me? Abuse means to me that you will not shout at me, or you will not use language which is filthy with me. So these are my own border controls. Yes, you will,
Right.
or if I feel small, actually, there are a few ways of practicing healthy control, and I will get to that in a moment. I also need to, or want to, give a bit more very prevalent examples of toxic control in these days. Uh, and when I say it's the unseen part, because shaming is such a feel it's present everywhere. Since we are growing up as children, we are hearing the language of, you should be ashamed of doing things, you should be ashamed of yourself for doing this. And that is a way of controlling our behavior as children, to a way which is more amenable, to a way which is more docile, maybe. And then as we are growing up, we feel ashamed of our status in society, or we feel ashamed of the privileges that we have, or even the privileges that we lack. We feel ashamed of how we look, or maybe the lack of our looks. We feel ashamed of what we own, what we don't own. So this is a very invisible language. Anything that tells us we are not enough. And when I talk about the safety part, in social media, when we are anonymous, when we don't use our own identity, it gives us a sense of safety. And then when we use that, from that anonymity, when we use that to belittle somebody, to make somebody feel small, that is our way of, exercising toxic control onto somebody else, for example, from a place of safety. You see, so the question that you asked is, how do we practice hence healthy control? How can we bring in healthy control? There are a few ways. We have to ask ourselves, first of all, what will make me feel secure and safe in this conversation, in this relationship. And you and I, we can design this, that this needs to be this way. Our relationship that can be this way. And we can define that. We can consciously design it. That is one
I,
way. Hmm.
I like what you're saying, Ruma, because in my previous company, they used to talk about establishing team norms,
Mhm.
right? Saying and I'm just trying to connect the dots here, because there were always known written rules as far as HR was concerned.
Mm.
But then we as leaders were also being encouraged to say there may be unwritten rules within your teams, and it may be a great idea to say it out loud so that all of us can jointly agree how we turn up and behave in particular situations,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So I think I can see the connection, because we are then trying to get the unknown and make it known.
Yes. And blaming, for example, very prevalent workplace thing, you did not do this on time or you were responsible for this, you know. So that's another subtle shaming tool. That's another toxic control tool if it goes overboard. And again, we can design this to say, well, in this conversation, there can be blaming that will come up. There will be blames that will happen. We will not use the blame mechanism. Well, what is another way of then saying that this was not done? Because yes, things are not getting done. Well, we have to call out the way things are. So designing the conversation more, I would say, in advance and more consciously with more awareness. We will not use this language, or we will not use, if we will not shout at each other, whichever way that you want to do it. There was another one conversation that was happening, which I was observing, where yes, there was a lot of blaming going on because things were really not working. So and there was this desire to obviously make things work. And then this other person suddenly says, "Hey, can we have this conversation without blaming? It's important, but can we have this without blaming?" And yes, you can have conversations without blaming and yet address the issue. So making or designing consciously how you want the relationship to be. And you can do that very quickly, even in a half an hour meeting or 1 hour meeting, or whichever way, how, how will we conduct this meeting? Usually we put the agenda items on the meeting, what we will cover in the meeting. We can also say, well, how we will conduct this meeting. 1 or 2 words, that's enough. That can be a very quick designing the meeting. The second way of practicing healthy control is also naming things. It's good to name because, again, naming things makes us feel safe. Okay, now I know what this is. And naming the emotion, naming, I'm feeling small in this conversation, I'm not feeling safe. It's a bit hard to do that, but even naming to yourself and getting into the habit of naming things actually makes us feel safe. So identify things that make us, identifying things that make us as human beings feel safe is definitely one way to practice healthy control. Uh, Another big way, obviously, is to start believing in ourselves, being comfortable in our skin where we don't feel small. Yes, we are in an environment that is all about control inadvertently, and the environment is not going to change. So, how can we feel enough in this environment, whatever that environment is? And we will have to build towards that, so that belief in ourselves and being very comfortable with in our own skin is another way. There is one other way which is not often used, which is actually setting up a rhythm in our lives. Whenever you will see there is chaos, there is uncertainty, things, your life is upside down. What makes us feel safe is some sort of rhythm, even if it is for 2 3 days or 2 3 hours a day or whatever it is. A rhythm gives us some sort of certainty in that chaos, gives us some sort of safety, and we don't feel the need to always toxically control. So that's another way of bringing in healthy control. So it's just some ways to bring in healthy control in our lives.
That's a that's a wonderful conversation, Ruba. I think we should wind up at this point in time while we are ahead. But I think that great conversation from why we see glory uh, in control.
Mm.
It's because we want safety.
Yes.
Uh, that there are two sides of the safety coin of the safety coin. One which is very healthy safety, and then there's a toxic control safety. Uh, and you've given us four very clear methods: design conversations without blame, naming the things and emotions that you feel, believing in yourself, uh, and knowing that you're enough, and for setting up a rhythm which you can fall back on when life becomes heavy. So awesome, Roma. Thank you. As always, a very enlightening conversation.
Thank you, Shah Rukh. As always, very good to speak to you.
All right. See you next time.